the UK government's crack negotiating team, after much bluster, has finally agreed to pay our EU divorce bill. It was never in doubt, really. The hard talk has always failed to comprehend that you can't just walk away from a contract you've already signed. Sums such as £50 sound huge, but it's always a good idea to look at big-sounding numbers in context. For a whole economy to spend as a one-off capital investment in order to preserve access to some key international institutions, it isn't such a terrible deal. Over 10 years, that's just 0.25% of GDP per year, which is significantly less than the potential impact a badly negotiated Brexit deal would have on the economy. Of course, it does still leave the question of how to pay for it. The UK has 4 options. First, we can reduce spending in the real economy. This is what people are thinking when they describe the numbers in terms of X thousand nurses or Y million school dinners. Second, we could raise taxes, and you can imagine how a Brexit tax would go down. Third, we can issue debt. Lastly, an idea that is heretical, but which economics blogger Chris Dillow says is by far the most logical, we just print the money. The EU Withdrawal Bill, once known as the Great Repeal Bill, is going through the House of Commons to repeal the 1972 European Communities Act and transpose all existing EU legislation into domestic UK law, which will avoid a cliff edge change on the day after we leave the EU. Parts of the bill have been highly controversial, and MPs have tabled hundreds of amendments to try and change its wording, including a significant number of conservative rebels. Some of the key controversies include its use of so-called Henry VIII powers, which will give government ministers the power to tweak the wording of laws to make sure they make sense in UK legislation, but those changes could take place without having to go through Parliament. MPs have called this a power grab by the government. The government estimates around 800 to 1,000 measures called statutory instruments will be required to make sure the bill is applied correctly. Other concerns include the government's decision not to include the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights in the law being transposed. Other amendments are attempts to affect the Brexit process, including legislating for a transitional period and giving MPs a binding meaningful vote on the deal secured by Theresa May, before the deal is finalized. Not literally, of course. While talk of printing money always triggers a call for the fainting couches and smelling salts, and conjures up images of wheelbarrows full of rapidly devaluing marks, nobody is suggesting that Boris Johnson pops over the channel with a few suitcases stuffed with cash. What would most likely happen is that the Debt Management Office would issue a round of bonds to cover the costs, as it must under its full financing role, which the Bank of England would then purchase back, putting the debt on the government's books as money it owes to itself. The £50 would just be added to the existing £435 the government already owes itself as a result of the bank's policy of quantitative easing.